Right, good morning. This is a brief run through, very basic and in layman's terms, of a flint lock and how the flint lock works and what some of the parts are called. In my write-ups I glibly throw around terms, and it just occurred to me that maybe not everybody knows what on earth I'm going on about. So this lock comes off of an 1801 to 1816 pattern long sea service pistol, which I'm currently restoring. When I got it, it was absolutely covered in rust. It wasn't holding in its second position. If you followed my Facebook posts on the restoration, you'll have seen that I've gone through various stages of cleaning it up. This is it, all put back together, and before I put it back onto the weapon, etc., I thought I'd just explain to you guys what some of the pieces are called. So, it's known as a tower lock because it has the word tower engraved across the back. This is where they were all assembled, and yes, that's the Tower of London. It's sometimes referred to as it's a military lock. It's got a beveled edge and a simple two-line engraved line border around the outside, as has the cock. So, terminology: backplate. This is the backplate. This is the cocking piece. These are the jaws of the cocking piece. They are actually serrated. Within the vice jaws of the cocking piece is held a piece of leather and the flint, hence flintlock. The idea is that when you bring together black powder, oxygen and a spark, you get ignition. So the lock does your primary ignition, which feeds down a small pipe, which is a hole here on the side of the barrel when it's in position, and which sets off the main charge. So this is called the pan, and within it is a depression which holds enough powder for a priming charge, priming pan. This is called the frizzen. This surface here is what the flint acts upon, strikes on, and as it strikes and drops shards of burning flint, sparking flint, the frizzen will open and the black powder will ignite, and the explosion will travel down the priming tube into the main charge and set the pistol off for good. It's a millisecond, half second or second type delayed reaction. So, looking at the outside, as mentioned before, we've got the word tower, showing us where it came from. We have got the royal cipher of the time, which is hand chiseled, and underneath GR, that's George the King, George Regina. Next to it is a proof or acceptance mark in the form of a crown and an arrow lying on its side. So, the frizzen is closed by being acted upon by this spring here, called the frizzen spring. This is constantly wanting to travel upwards, and so depending on what angle the frizzen is, it forces it either forwards or backwards. Later versions have a roller which helps, called the frizzen roller. The main fixing screw, because we're still in state of a restoration, main fixing screw is back in the workshop with the other kit. So, if we look at the inside and what makes all this happen, it looks complicated at first, but in fact it's amazingly simple. Once again, everything's mounted to the back plate. This is the main spring. This acts upon the cocking piece, sending it forwards at a rate which will cause a spark. The spring is hooked onto a part called the tumbler. The tumbler is stepped and is held in position by this piece, which is known as the sear, or the trigger sear. On moving it upwards, the force exerted by the leaf spring pushes the tumbler backwards, which in fact rolls the cocking piece forwards. And at full cock, that happens quite quickly. The sear wants to jump into the stepped tumbler because it is pressurized by the sear spring. The piece over the top that holds it all into position is called the saddle. Everything's been cleaned. I've returned the heads, cleaned up the heads because they were really gnarled up. But in the restoration, I have discovered that the tumbler is quite severely chewed up, and so is the sear tooth. So it's at the moment a very light trigger pull. All it has to do is be pushed up by the action of you pulling the trigger, lifted out of the groove in the tumbler, and it will rapidly be pushed down by this powerful spring. Shouldn't do this too much, but basically this is how it happens, like that. So there you have it. The working parts, as stripped down and cleaned, of one sea service tower flintlock mechanism. Hope that makes some sense.